Hi, this is Ken Rimple of Chariot Solutions, and I'm here to talk to you today about WaveMaker. It's something that VMware just purchased through the SpringSource division, in just this week. So it's a IDE that runs in a browser, and it generates code that does client-side AJAX using Dojo as a JavaScript library to put together widgets that communicate with a server-side piece, which is written actually in Spring and Hibernate. So that's what WaveMaker is. It's geared towards the business-type developer, the ones that might have been doing Power Builder years ago, less engineering-focused, more focused on getting things done quickly with widgets on screens and some light scripting and some light development. But it actually is hiding some pretty powerful potential features for you. So I can understand why VMware looked at it and said this would be a potentially good purchase. Okay, so WaveMaker is booting, and as it starts up, it will bring up a browser window, and that browser window actually looks kind of nice. Let's see here. I definitely spent a lot of time sculpting this thing, and so this is WaveMaker Studio's IDE. Again, I'm running it here in Chrome. And Chrome is a very fast JavaScript browser, so that's why I'm doing that. And so you'll see that it starts up with, a create new project, or you can look at some tutorials. There's about 6 of those, or go to the documentation, so on and so forth, or look at some samples. We're going to actually get started by creating a simple application based on the Dell factory. I think it's a Dell factory outlet sample database, or a Dell computer sample database that I found on Postgres, just to give us something to look at. It has a fair volume of data in it, so we'll give you an idea what it looks like when it's loading some more sophisticated, deep amounts of code or data. So what we'll do is we'll just go ahead and create a new project by clicking the Create button. And let's just do, we'll do, just for the sake of argument, menu on the side. So I'm going to click OK here. It's setting up a new project. And when it's done with that project, now we've got, it looks like 3 or 4 different things going on here. A little menu, cute. And then we've got our panel here. And as we click on things, we should see different panels appear. I don't know if you can see this, but if you look on the right, you'll see a panel number showing up here. And if I switch, it flips to a different panel, it looks like. So anyway, let's not get too hung up on that. But that's what they're doing there, is they're giving you menus. So let's just go ahead and throw some things in here. We're going to change our application name. Everything works in a graphical tool kit. Now, you do have the ability to go to source code. This screencast, we're not going to really talk about it, except to point out that if you look at the things they're showing you here, dojo.declare main start function, interestingly, there definitely are a bunch of Dojo objects in here. So the AJAX client and widget client library is based in Dojo. So I'm going to go ahead and click on this application name here. I'm going to change the caption to, let's see, we're going to call this Customer Manager. Okay, so that takes care of that. What we'll do is we will go ahead and connect our application to a database. So we'll go to Services, and we'll do Import Database. Now, the open source version, yes, there's an open source version, and there is a commercial version of WaveMaker. They charge for the more advanced database drivers, SQL Server, Oracle, and they also charge for more enterprise features like LDAP integration and enterprise security and such. Curiously, though, they don't charge you for some of the Spring stuff like Spring security that's built into the free product, and basic Hibernate mappings are built into the free product. So let's take a look at this. What we're going to do is connect to that Postgres SQL database I was mentioning. Let's see. So Postgres, and my database is Dell Store 2, and we'll do a test connection. Yay, connection successful. So first thing is they include the Postgres driver, which is a nice touch. So when I click on import, the next thing it's going to do is it's actually going through and it's taking the database definitions and turning them into database widgets. On the left in this grayed out panel, you'll see database widgets now has a plus in it. If I open that up, all of a sudden I've got all my different database widgets that I can work with. And so what we'll do is we'll drag customers into this form. And it asks me how we'd like to see it. We could do a grid with a live form, or we could do a grid that has a pop-up form. Let's do the live form. That looks a little more fun. So when I click OK, it builds that. It just basically does a select of all the columns in the database, and it fetches like 50 rows at a time. And it will actually do this live at this point. We now have it loading up data. And there you can see if I drag my mouse down, I actually see different pieces of data as it's fetching them. So I can move along here. If I click on one, the live editor actually brings up data. And you don't see it here because I'm running out of real estate because of all the headers, but there's a new update and delete button. Now there's a little tiny icon up top next to open page. You can see we have only one page called main, and that dialog shows an outline view toggle. If I click that off, now we'll see more what a user will see. And as I click on an object, it will list the name of that object, like these are editors for the different fields. If I click on the top here, let's see if I can get that. Then it's the details panel that holds all these fields. If I click over here, it's the customer data grid. If I right-click on customer data grid, it brings up a little pop-up menu, and I can pick edit columns. Maybe the grid only needs just the first name. Maybe I don't even care about the customer ID. First name, last name. We'll do state and country, and well, we don't need state and country. Let's just do email and phone, and we'll get rid of the credit card stuff. We don't need that. So now we've got a really simple look here, and we're able to take a look at this live. If I click on search, I wonder what happens. Probably we'd have to play around with that a little bit to figure out how to trigger it. But let's do the first thing we can do very easily, which is go ahead and test this thing by clicking run. So when I click on run, it actually kicks it off running against the live database in a browser that it pops up for the purpose. So it's loading this now. One thing I want to note is this database is pretty hefty. So it's taking a little while to load. I don't know, it's 10,000 rows or something. You wouldn't do this in production. You would limit this. And we'll have a later screencast to show you how to limit it maybe to lazy load 50 rows and stop, and to let me search. This is a very early, just kind of getting introduced to the tool. I'm certainly not a deep expert in it yet myself. So if I wanted to modify something in metaphors, you click on update. That makes all these fields editable, and you can do what you need to do. So, you know, for example, if I want to change this to dude@dell.com, sure I'm going to owe someone money for that statement. You know, I can hit tab, hit save, and hopefully it will then update. Now I noticed before I had to scroll away and scroll back, or do some funny, funky things to reload this to get the dude thing going. So there's some refresh issues, I think, here, where it just takes a little while for it to reload. Oh, there it is. So it was just the volume that we were dealing with because we had so many that was loading that it just, you know, took a while to update this. It was refreshing when I saved. Now let's take a couple minutes and take a look at what's happening behind the scenes here. I'm going to close this application. We'll look at some of the panes here. So I can click on the customers. And now what I'm looking at is I'm looking at, on the right, the customers dojo grid called WaveMaker.dojo grid. So WaveMaker Dojo grid, I guess the type, and customers dojo grid is the instance. And you can see we have options here like, you know, display, case sensitivity, you know, if you want to let it select things. Let's see here, single click to edit as opposed to double click to edit. You know, how do I do selections? Can I do multiple rows of my selections? And things like that. If I click on a field over here, so now we're looking at address 1, editor 1 as a WaveMaker text widget. And I believe, let me see if I can get help on the widget itself. Probably not in here. Oh, maybe documentation. This might just pop out to the main docs. In fact, I think it does. Which is just the high-level documentation here. But you can change the height, the width, the caption size. You can change what the caption is. And, you know, if it's a password field, like the password down here, we can click on it and then change to password. So that way people can't see what the passwords are when they're being shown. Let's see. So then what we could do is we can save this thing, and we can then do a deployment. And when we do deployment, it'll ask us, do we want to do an ear file for Webster or JBoss or a WAR file for Tomcat or Jetty? So I'm going to do a WAR file. You can also notice there's managed cloud servers. So if you had a cloud service provider, check that out. So maybe EC2 if you have a server there, Amazon, Rackspace, Eucalyptus. Interesting stuff, right? So we have that, or we can deploy to a server, and then, local Tomcat, there it is, right? So if you had a Tomcat with the manager turned on, theoretically you can have it deploy right to there. Interesting. So we'll go back to Generate Application. We'll go to WAR file. We'll click Generate Application. Now it's building a WAR that I can then download later. Then what we'll do is we'll deploy that, fire it up, and then we'll look at what the exploded WAR looks like to give you a feel for what the Spring components and Hibernate components are that it deploys. This does take a little bit of time. All right. And by the way, while we're talking about this, the WaveMaker does seem to have a community presence out there. There are certainly a bunch of forums, and there are a lot of people talking about it, even on the post from Rob Johnson. And the standard thing you'll see is that first people are like, I don't ever want to use one of these tools, because there are a lot of developers who've been through VB and other things in the past, and they maybe didn't like the lack of control or the kind of the black box approach it took to doing anything super customized. And Power Builder, same kind of thing. If you did that and then you found Java was more freeing and you had a lot more control. Yeah, it took longer, but you had more engineering level control over something. No offense to Power Builder, because I did it for years and I was very deep into it. But the thing is, this tool is really a Spring and Hibernate app development tool with Ajax. So it's worth at least looking at to see where VMware is headed with it, and the fact that they're basically aiming for developers who these applications are ones they want to modify and tweak quickly and hack with, like an Access application, and you may not want to get into that mode because they may not have the budget to have you do casual application development, whereas if they learned a little bit about it and dragged widgets around, maybe they could use some of your Spring Beans to get it done. So think about it from that end too. So we'll see how that bears itself out. So I'm going to click on Download Application here. And it downloaded our project WAR. So I'm going to show that in the Finder. I gave it a really useful name like Project. Really exciting. And what I'm going to do in here is I'm going to go to my Tomcat command line. And I'm just going to say copy. And I'm going to copy the project.war by dragging it, I love Mac, into my web apps directory. I'm going to go into the bin directory of Tomcat and do Catalina run, not shell, and let Tomcat run. And Tomcat's going to fire up. And what this is doing is giving you a completely standalone, oops, that's interesting because I did not deploy that one, did I? I drag and dropped the wrong file, didn't I? I think I did. No. Maybe I didn't delete the other one. Okay, well, the other one I didn't delete, but that's not a big deal. So you'll see in here that it did boot somewhere up here. It did boot the application. There it is, Project WAR. So if I kick that off in the background, I'm going to remove my, let me go to the web apps directory. I'm going to remove the Dell Store one. Kill that, and then kill the .war, because that's an old one. Get to it before it gets to you. And now I'm going to look at the project. At the same time, I'm going to boot project up in port 8080 on Tomcat. And it's going to complain to me about leaving the IDE because it doesn't want you to, screw up and forget something. Now, this is the same app we looked at before, only it's running standalone completely outside of the WaveMaker environment as a WAR. We'll go back and we'll look at project, the directory. So it's got its CSS files, and it looks like there's some built-in CSS, but you can change it. We have things like different script files, and this looks like hypersonic SQL demo database stuff that we didn't really need. We have the page, our main page here, which has a bunch of code in it. We've got the services that it built, which Del Store 2 is one of those services. You can see it defined it as JSON, kind of a just JSON configuration. Then we get into the webinf directory. We'll look at classes, and you'll see there's a com Del Store 2 data directory. And look at this. This is Hibernate. So if we look at the categories HBM XML file, there it is. I could search, or I could go over to the, let me see here. I could go over to the source directory for project. This is the source directory, and open this up and go to, where is it on here? Services, Del Store, source. This is generated code, and there's the Java files for each. So, there we go. So we've got our categories object, we've got the HBM XML file, and we've got the Java Pojo. We've got the customer history one and the Java Pojo. We've got customer history ID. It's a multi-part key. So look at that. It built the key for us. So this is just doing the HBM to DDL or DDL to HBM or what have you commands to do the reverse engineering into a bunch of XML-based Hibernate. And it may be more than that, in fact, doing that work. And then it looks like it has some queries and also the class that kind of does the, looks like DML for it. So you can see here I've got like an insert, an update, a delete, begin, commit, rollback, some generated kind of DAO type stuff. But then even more interestingly, yeah, we've got log4j booted in there, which is nice, so you can amp up some of the different beans that have been created in here if you want to. Look at this. They even give you the Hibernate ones, and they comment them out. That's very cool because, you know, half the time you have to go look that stuff up and paste it in, you know, so on and so forth. But if we go to the web app root, this is where I find this really interesting. I'll just do this from this side. Oh, sorry. I'll do this from the editor side here. So again, it embeds that, and in our web app directory here, we also have some Spring Bean files. So let me just open one of these up. So we'll look at the user web file. First of all, that's just a regular old web application file. If you wanted to do your own servlet objects, you can boot them there. If you want to run a business Spring context, I guess you could boot that there too if you want to. So here's the project Spring app. This is booting Spring's dispatcher servlet, and you'll notice it imports all of the other XML files. So you could follow this along if you're a Spring person and very easily start doing this. Now notice it's actually using XML-based stuff instead of annotation-driven. I think that's realistic because that's what you're using when you're using a parser. XML is much more controllable than modifying Java code. You know, if you look at what Ru is doing behind the scenes to manipulate Java code, that's a lot of work. So this is going down the XML approach with the prior Spring MVC configuration for some of these things, which is kind of interesting. If you look at the project Spring file, that's for you, for beans you want to mount. So if we go back to services, one of the options, let me just open my current project here. One of the options was to pick services, and one of the services was Java service. So package and class name, service name. And I'm sure there's other ones that you could do as well, you know, that are more like a Spring service or something. So I'll have to look into that and see if I can give you an easy way to do that. Anyway, back to our little thing here. So there you go. We've got you know, a project configuration that it looks like it would set up for you. The managers right there, look at that. That is actually setting up some type managers to manage some objects. There's also somewhere in here services. It looks like there's a built-in runtime service bean that it boots, and Spring Web App, like we saw before. And somewhere in here there was a Spring context file that actually booted up our Hibernate objects. But anyway, the point is that there is Spring behind this and there's Hibernate behind this. So that's very interesting. And if you take a look at the jars, it is basically building a Spring 3.04. This is not an old platform at all. This is really using pretty modern Spring for the most part, and it's doing it through XML because it's manipulating XML to configure the application. So that's it for the first screencast around WaveMaker. I'll probably do one or two more as I hack around this a little bit more and see how I can integrate with Spring and do some other things, maybe even with Roo if I can get anywhere with that. But at a minimum, now you at least see what they're going for. Again, they're going for that business developer user, maybe for someone creating dashboards or simple CRUD screens, and they don't want to have to contract the developer to pay for that. Now, the thing is, you're going to have to pay for a production license if you're going to go to Oracle or SQL Server or go to any kind of enterprise LDAP or such. So you need to research pricing and see if it makes sense for you. They also have a cloud version of this, so you can literally just run this in the cloud and write applications standalone in the cloud for your departmental things. So maybe this is something where if you're booting a training company like we're doing with our training, maybe a simple tracking app would make sense to do in WaveMaker rather than building a whole Spring app for the short term. Again, if you're a Spring developer and you're doing enterprise level software, this may not be exactly what you're looking for, but it might be a component of it for certain types of users. And that's it. If you want to learn more about what we do at Chariot Solutions, head over to chariotsolutions.com. I run our training as well as evangelism around different technologies and things like Spring. So if you have any interest, you can go to our education. We do Spring training and Maven training right now. So if you head over to chariotsolutions.com/education, you can see that. And also, you can listen to our tech casts. If you go to techcast.chariotsolutions.com, we've got 2.5+ years of great interviews, sessions from conferences, from our Emerging Tech Conference, and a number of other things as well. So hopefully there's stuff in there that will be useful to you, and I appreciate you stopping by and watching this screencast.